In the 19th century American West, just surviving was a full-time job. It was brutal. It was relentless. And today we're going to dive into how a game that looks incredibly simple on the surface, Oxtrail, actually manages to capture that struggle with just a few lines of code. It creates this digital frontier that's just as unforgiving as the real one ever was.
So you look at this, and what do you see, right? It's got these charming, simple graphics. You've got your Pioneer, a couple of oxen, a little wagon. But don't let that fool you for a second. Every single pixel you see here represents a massive decision on a really dangerous journey. One wrong move, and that's it. Game over. End of the trail. So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the wagon, your little mobile fortress. Then, the oxen, the silent engines powering your whole trip. After that, we'll dig into what it takes to survive day to day. We'll also cover what happens when disaster inevitably strikes. And finally, we'll see those little glimmers of hope, the outposts of civilization you might find along the way.
All right, let's start with the absolute heart of your whole expedition, the wagon. Now, this is not just a truck for your stuff. Out on the trail, this thing is your house, it's your kitchen, it's your workshop. You know, historically, they call these things prairie schooners. And in this game, it is, without a doubt, the most important thing you have.
Yeah, the wagon's job is so much bigger than just moving you from one side of the screen to the other. It holds literally everything you own, everything you need to not die. How you manage the space inside it and how well you protect it from damage, well, that's going to decide if you even make it through the first week.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The code models this in a pretty brutal way. You start with only 8 inventory slots. Just 8! That has to hold your food, your water, your tools, spare parts, everything. Now you can add a canopy and that doubles your space to 16 slots, which is huge. But you have to find or buy that canopy. Every single choice forces you into the exact same kind of awful trade-offs the real pioneers had to make. Is it more important to carry extra food or the tools to maybe hunt for food later? An extra blanket for the cold or a spare part for the wagon itself?
And that leads perfectly to our next point. Your amazing, perfectly packed wagon is completely worthless if you don't have the power to pull it. So let's talk about the real unsung heroes of this whole story, both in history and in the game. The oxen. They are your engines, but man, are they fragile.
Take a look at this number, 0.05. It doesn't look like much, does it? Well, this number is pulled straight from the game's code, and it's the rate that an ox's thirst goes up every single second. It's this constant, relentless ticking clock in the background. It's this silent pressure that forces you to plan your entire journey around finding water, just like the real pioneers had to. If you ignore this number, your engines will just stop, permanently.
So keeping your team alive isn't just a passive thing, it's a constant job. You literally have to find rivers and then unleash the oxen so they can drink. Or you can carry this super heavy water butt with you, but guess what? That takes up one of your precious inventory slots. This whole system is a simulation of the backbreaking, daily chores that made up a pioneer's life.
Of course, keeping your oxen alive is only half the problem. You also have to keep yourself alive. And the frontier is this place of constant, nagging need. The game simulates this perfectly with this never-ending cycle of hunger and thirst that forces you to actually get out there and interact with the world to survive.
You know, you can really boil down survival on the trail to this basic loop: problem meets solution. You're starving? Well, you better hope you can find a river to fish in or that you had the foresight to plant some corn. Need to build a fire to make it through the night? Hope you chopped some wood earlier. This loop, problem, action, solution, that's the core of the whole experience.
And sometimes your solution comes with a healthy dose of pure luck. Just look at this. This is what the code calls a loot table for fishing. Basically, it's the odds of what you might pull out of the river. So 60% of the time, great, you get a fish, but there's a 10% chance you'll just pull up a piece of wood, and then there's a 10% chance you'll fish up a spare wagon wheel. Can you imagine? In the middle of nowhere, that one absurd lucky moment could be the only thing that saves your entire journey.
But you can't rely on luck forever. The game also lets you plan for the long term. If you want to build a cornfield, you have to invest your resources first. You need a water butt and some wood. And then it takes time, it takes effort, but the payoff is huge, a reliable source of food. This whole mechanic is about that critical pioneer skill, the ability to go from just barely surviving to actually building a life for yourself.
But you know how it goes. Even the most perfect plan can get completely wrecked in a heartbeat. The trail is unpredictable, and the game simulates this with something called the hardship system. It's just a series of totally random events that can pop up at any time and turn your nice, smooth trip into an absolute nightmare.
Let's just walk through one of the most common disasters, the broken wheel. The code just triggers a broken wheel event, and the result is immediate and awful. Your wagon is busted. You can't move. You are stranded. The only way you're getting out of this is if you had the brilliant foresight to carry a spare wheel, or if you have enough wood to try and patch one together. A simple event in the code suddenly becomes a genuine life-or-death situation.
And oh, it doesn't stop with broken wheels. Not even close. Bandits can just show up and steal your stuff. You can get sick out of nowhere, and bam, you lose a fifth of your health. A snake could bite one of your oxen, crippling your ability to travel. Every single one of these things is pulled from the real history of the trail, and it just adds this layer of constant nagging dread to your journey.
So when that happens, when your wheel snaps or you're burning up with a fever, what do you do when the closest thing to civilization, a town like Elkridge here, is hundreds of miles away? Suddenly, the stakes are just incredibly, unbelievably high.
And that's what makes these little settlements so vital. I mean, out there in that huge, lonely wilderness, towns were way more than just a place to buy some flour. They were these critical hubs for safety, for rest, and for actual human connection. They were your chance to breathe before you had to plunge back into the wild.
In the game, you see this with the hotel. It costs 2 gold to stay the night. Mechanically, what it does is it fills up your health bar and your oxen's health bars. Pretty simple transaction, right? But the real meaning behind it is so much deeper, and we can actually find a clue about that in another little feature you might overlook. Take a look at this. This is just a piece of placeholder text. It's from the guest book you can find in the game's hotels. Write a note. It seems so small, so trivial. But when you think about it, after all the hardship and the loneliness of the trail, this represents something incredibly profound. That basic human need to communicate, to share your story, to just leave a little mark that says, I was here, I made it.
And this isn't just a fantasy. This is a direct, powerful connection to real history. Real pioneers left messages for each other on trail registers. They carved them into rocks, anything they could find. There were notes of warning, messages of hope, a way to feel connected. This little guest book in the game is a digital echo of that exact same human impulse, to build a community even when you're separated by hundreds of miles and months of brutal travel.
So, from stressing over inventory slots to leaving a message in a digital guest book, Oxtrail manages to turn simple lines of code into this really powerful simulation of an epic chapter in history. And it kind of leaves you with this one big question. If a game that looks this simple can hold such a deep, complex human story, what other histories, what other incredible narratives are just waiting for us, hidden inside the code that we interact with every single day?